Hello, everyone. We know that people are still coming in. We just wanted to play you as much music as we can while folks are here, so thank you. We're just going to start off with a song called, appropriately for a film and music evening, Noiresque. And not necessarily film noir, but it's an original composition by Deborah Kreisberg over here, our clarinet sax player. And it kind of mixes up sort of Yiddish processional to the chuppah with a jazz waltz feel. And then we'll get more into our main event. But here we are with a little warming up the room for you. Deborah Kreisberg, composer, a little excerpt from Noiresque.
Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. Welcome for those of you who have been here before. A special welcome to those of you who haven't been here ever before. My name is Shirley Bachar. I'm the Director of Academic and Cultural Programs for the American Jewish Historical Society, so AJHS. We are 5 different partner organizations here at the Center for Jewish History. So AJHS is one of 5 organizations: LBI, YIVO, ASF, and the Yeshiva University Museum. I'd like to thank YIVO and the association, the American Society for Jewish Music, for partnering with us for this event. And this is a very special event tonight. We're closing a tremendous year of programs and art projects. We did like really new stuff this year. It was wonderful, and we really look forward to starting the fall season again in September. We're gonna have an exhibition here about the year 1917 and an art installation, so a lot to look forward to. Tonight's program is also special because we're kicking off Pride Month, and a little earlier, yes, than it's usually marked, so it's great. And also, it's very special because it's just going to be a very special night. So what are we going to see tonight? We're going to see some clips, excerpts from old Yiddish American movies where there's going to be some queer scenes, some homoerotic insinuations. So a lot to look forward to. And we're gonna listen to music from these movies in new renditions by the Isle of Klezbos. They're here, right here with me. And yeah, so with no further ado, I'm just gonna invite to the stage the mind behind this event and really the leading person, Eve Sicular, to say a few words and start the show going. Thanks a lot. See you later.
Thank you, everyone, so much for being here. Thank you, Shirley Bahar. Big hand. This is like a big, beautiful thing to be here. You know, I just want to start right off with the concept of the celluloid closet, in particular the Yiddish Celluloid Closet. So the way I like to describe this project, I say, as you may have read in some other descriptions, despite the taboo surrounding homosexuality, especially in the era of what was called the Hays Code in New York, in Hollywood, in the United States, but also generally this kind of feeling, even in international films, that, you know, this topic was really too risque. Nevertheless, it was too intriguing to be left entirely out of the picture, including the Yiddish picture. And an exploration of lesbian and gay subtext in Yiddish cinema during its heyday from the 1920s to the outbreak of World War II reveals distinctly Jewish concerns of the time intertwined with a striking array of allusions to this highly charged subject. So the 4 movies that we'll focus on primarily, as much as we have time for today, sometimes I give this only as a talk and it can go on 2 hours, so we're gonna give you lots of great nuggets. Yiddelmeet Fiedel, which was Molly Picant's big 1936 blockbuster, Americaner Shadkhn, which is a wonderful 1940 movie made by Edgar Ulmer. And then the classic, those 2 are kind of musical comedies, and then 2 classic dramas, Der Vilner Shtot Khazn, otherwise known in English as Overture to Glory, and The Dybbuk. In each of these, queerness reaches the screen in various guises, emerging as a kind of alternate take on themes from conflicted identity to passing to same-sex attachments and so on. And I want to actually take my other podium over here so that I can run the clips for you. As some of you may know, who here has heard of the Celluloid Closet itself and Vito Russo? Great. We're going to get right to some of that. So I was fortunate enough that right when I had graduated college and I moved to the Pacific Northwest, someone where I was doing some film studies immediately recommended to me this new book that was out, The Celluloid Closet by none other than Vito Russo. We see him here. We see the book cover. And we see a photo of actually myself and my brother Stephen in 89 June in Seattle. So there are a lot of stories here, but I'll just try to be brief. So Vito, before he ever had a book, and of course the movie that came out on HBO was posthumous. Vito had already passed away in November of 1990. Some say, since it was so close to a terrible election day where Strom Thurmond was reelected, that was too much for him. He, of course, was also one of the founders of AIDS Coalition and Unleash Power, ACT UP, later on. But back in the day, he was just enchanted by finding these hidden, covert subtexts of queerness, especially in Hollywood films. And he would show evenings to his friends. Eventually, he was showing them at gay community centers. And eventually, he made this into a book. And that's when I got to read it. Fortunately for me, not only did he publish this book, but also a friend of mine told me, of course, as soon as I'd moved out of Oregon and north to Seattle, that he was going to actually present it live south in Olympia. So my friend and I drove like 5 hours to see Vito Russo present in person. It was one of the most inspiring things I've ever seen. And I kept in touch with Vito. And a couple of years later, when I was living in Washington State, I talked to some people with a lesbian and gay film festival. I said, wouldn't it be amazing? He hasn't ever presented it live up here. And to my shock and dismay, they said, oh, but he's been diagnosed positive. How can we be sure he'd be around if we book him to come? And I was so outraged that I actually founded a nonprofit with the main purpose of bringing him to come do his talk, which is when this happened. And it was a beautiful thing because we booked the talk in, I think it was February of '89. And in the intervening months, between February and June, Seattle had formed its ACT UP chapter. So this is actually the morning after his lecture where he's about to go to the brunch in his honor. And that was a beautiful thing, but then I moved back to New York. Unfortunately, I never did see Vito alive again. And I was fortunate in that soon after I moved to New York, I was working at the Museum of Modern Art on a big Yiddish film retrospective as like assistant to 3 amazing curators, including Jay Hoberman, Jim Hoberman, Adrian Mancia, and some others. And to my surprise and delight, I started to see the kinds of things that if Vito had been alive, I would have been calling him up or writing letters. Guess what I saw? Guess what I saw? These little glimmerings kept happening. And it was a super, super busy time. That series went on for months. And I just made little notes to myself, and it took about 3 years till I actually had the chance to write an article for a journal. And very soon after that, and by that time I was actually working at YIVO, when YIVO used to be up on 86th Street and 5th Avenue, where now the Neue Galerie is. I thought of Vito a lot working at MoMA, because he used to do a lot of his research there. And so it was really this amazing, amazing thing that I started to see this stuff. And after I wrote the paper, someone very quickly offered me the opportunity to give a talk. And so this Clips lecture of mine was very much, in tribute to the memory of Vito Russo. So I'd like to share with you now the first of the clips and a number that we've adapted. And by the way, Isle of Klezbos, these wonderful women and I are in a band now going on, next year it'll be 2 decades. And thank you. Sign our mailing list. We'll let you know. And some of us have been even playing together longer in a band that I also formed prior to that called Metropolitan Klezmer, which is still alive and very well. And it was really the fact of doing this Yiddish Celluloid Closet on festival tours and at conferences and so on that emboldened me to call an all-women's band Isle of Klezbos and just know that that would really be cool in the world. Not everybody knew that at that time. So there's an arrangement that I'm really lucky. Even though I was doing the talk already from 1994, there were plenty of discoveries that came later. And I'm still to this day, and especially in a place like this, I'm very happy if you tell me things that I haven't noticed. Please, I'm open. So this particular piece we're about to play you, we've given the name Musikalischer Tango. Yes, it resembles many other Eastern European and Yiddish tangos, but it's very specific because this especially is something that I would have loved to play for Vito because it's from the only Yiddish screwball comedy. And unlike the Yiddish screwball comedies that Vito's so beautifully documented, where you have some kind of glamorous movie star guy and these fey sidekicks. Well, there was a Yiddish Fred Astaire, quote unquote, named Leo Fuchs, who was cast in the lead role. But maybe because it was low budget ethnic films, he also got to play his own fey sidekick, you'll see what I mean. And the movie is called Americaner Shadkhn, American Matchmaker, and the guy himself just can't seem to get married, but he's great at fixing other people up, right? We've seen these people. So we'll just go right into that. And I think there's plenty else to say, but we're only showing you this number from it, out of order, out of sequence. In a way, we'll show you lots more about it, because like I said, I only discovered this part when I went back as a band leader. I said, oh, didn't that movie have that great cabaret scene? I think there was a great tune. Maybe we'll do an arrangement. And as I'm watching it, I understood it was a coming out song. And other things had happened in intervening years. Edgar Ulmer's widow was then still alive. She had a conversation with someone I knew who had seen my talk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There were many such wonderful coincidences. Thank you, Vito, if you had anything to do with those. So we're going to go now into the tango scene, the cabaret. So hopefully my PowerPoint and I are going to stay friends. All right, here we go. By the way, there's a whole Yinglish side to this, so I think you'll hear it.
In der riesig größer Stut kann man sehr leicht hereinfahren in ungewünschter Gesellschaft.
Oh, sicher. New York ist ein größer skating rink. Man geht auf Eis.
Ihr kennt die Melodie? Sehr eine schöne Melodie. Die Wörter kennt ihr euch? Euch nicht? Ich will probieren, es in die Vereine. Bin auf dir nicht in Kass, all den treurigen Spaß. Und so ist beschert, ich hab dich nicht gewährt. Manches Mal, wenn ich klär, halt am navische Tränen. Es wird vorübergehen, wirst allein du sehen, bin auf dir nicht in Kass.
Ist das ich schon, ist versteh ich schon, es ist ein trauriger Spaß. Nicht in Kass, bei dem treurigen Spaß, und das so ist beschert, ich hab dich nicht erwehrt, mach es mal, wenn ich gelehrt, hat ein narischer Trär, wird darüber
Schönen Dank. Melissa Fogarty, everybody.
Thank you.
So as I said, you know, we have both Metropolitan Klezmer and Isle of Klezbos. We also have two different film projects that I've coordinated with Yiddish films. First, the Yiddish Celluloid Closet, and then a larger project that's just all kinds of music from Yiddish films. And there's a kind of a Venn diagram. They overlap. And actually, we're going to play you something now, which was in the description originally in the promotion for this lecture. That's not strictly the Yiddish Celluloid Closet, but it gives us a great excuse to play a klezmer tune. So we can't have the opportunity go by, right? We're Isle of Klezbos. And so we're going to take a little detour outside of the Yiddish Celluloid Closet proper to go into a movie called Uncle Moses from 1932, early in the sound film era. This was a real great vehicle for a guy named Morris Schwartz, maybe some of you know. He was a great director and actor, and he has this overbearing role in the title role, Uncle Moses, who's a sweatshop owner. And we're about to watch the tenement wedding scene where he marries the much younger daughter of some of his employees. Of course, she's marrying him not out of love, but because her parents want her to marry the rich guy. And we're going to come right in on the scene where her true love, who of course lives directly across the air shaft from the apartment where this is being held, is you know, trying to not be distraught. And so you'll see Charlie, who of course is a labor organizer, of course. And then we get a little bit of the morning after with Moses. What else can I tell you about this? Oh, and the other excuse for the through line between the last tune and this one, in terms of the film clips, the same actress you just saw as the matchmaking client, the very sophisticated Judith, is now still the actress. Judith Abarbanel is playing Mashallah, the bride who won't come to bed the next morning, if you know what I mean. So here we go. A little bit of Lower East Side 1932 with great klezmer music. And it's a sound effect. Look, it gets louder as you open the window. That's Eve Sicular playing Charlie, by the way, another Yiddish actor of great renown. Now there's a painting on the wall of his first wife, now deceased. Ein, zwei, ein, zwei. Well, we're going to go back to the Yiddish Celluloid Closet proper. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview, and particularly a focus on Molly Pecan. Who's familiar with Molly? Anybody? Okay. So let me just pull up a laptop for a moment. There we go. We're actually. Oh no, I can't do that. Okay, you know what? Let me go back. I'm going to just change my mind about that. We've got actually a start on this. We've got to start on these clips now. We're going to show you a few stills. And again, an excuse for some music. We're going to show you a little teaser image at first, which is of a matchmaker with two matchmakers, two brides meeting, which of course, you know, why not? But in 1925 in the Soviet Union, even in the more liberal years of the Soviet Union, it was still just a visual joke. And it was actually part of a Sholem Aleichem story that was adapted by the Goset, the Государственный еврейский театр, or the Moscow Yiddish State Theater, had one film called Yiddish Celluloid, or Еврейское счастье, or Jewish Luck, and it starred Solomon Machoils as, in this scene, the sort of a would-be matchmaker. He was kind of trying always to he was a Luftmensch. He was always trying to make something out of nothing. So he had picked up a matchmaker's book on the train and tried to work out, you know, the deals. And he just assumed that since this person was a dentist, they had to be a guy. So he was fixing up. So we've got a little something from there, and we're going to use that as the excuse to play some music, also from the Goset, the Taylor's Share. And we'll see how this works out. Why don't you guys just play that, and I'll give a little more of the Molly Pecan. Here we go. So we're going to do the double brides first. Here we go. Go ahead, you guys. That's the Goset music to go along with this image. Can you hear me? A little quieter, a little quieter. There we go. Now we're going to see some of these wonderful stills of Molly in drag, in various kinds of drag. This is Molly in a very early version of Yankala, a show that she reprised for decades and decades. Here she is, two stills from Untitled Chapter in 1934. And then in 1937, she's playing a butcher role in Bublichki. This is the year after her big hit in Yiddelmeiden Fiddle. Here she is at YIVO in 1982, getting her Lifetime Achievement Award in a tuxedo with none other than a pinky ring. Yes, a pinky ring. And somebody showed me that. Now we're going to go into some silent movie footage, going back in time a little. This is from 1923, a significant year which I'll describe. Here she is. She's not only in drag, she's in Hasidic drag. She's very defiant, right? It's like she's absolutely not taking any kind of gaff until her father shows up. He's actually played by Sidney Golden, and he's finally had enough of all her antics, and she is spanked. So there you go. Molly has finally gone too far, even for her father, who has shaven his beard. Okay, that's great, you guys. So let's wrap this one up. Beautiful, beautiful. A hand for the Taylor's Share. Now, I'm showing low battery on here. I'm just saying, Yoni, I just want you to be ready up there. I'm going to try replugging this in, or maybe Yoni, our tech guy, will come down for a moment and just do that while I'm giving this lecture. We're also going to be showing you the difference then between this 1923 Molly and Drag movie compared to the 1936 enormous hit Yiddelmeiden Fiddle. So it's still a huge box office thing whenever Molly is in drag, but they had to come up with a different context that worked for the era, that worked for her audience. So where, you know, in the Roaring 20s, it was fine for everybody to be kind of challenging, you know, the status quo and the old and the musty tradition. You know, two things happened. First of all, we know lots now about immigration law, lots more than maybe some of us were thinking about a lot before this year. But in 1924, there was a big, big restriction. There were like suddenly quotas on Eastern and Southern European peoples coming into the United States. So suddenly, where in 1923, it was kind of hilarious to make fun of the old country, you know, after 1924, there was a little more sense. Thank you very much, Yoni. Big hand for Yoni, our great tech guy. Thank you very much. We tried getting it all charged, but it's an old computer. So, you know, Austin Vest, the scholar Jeffrey Chandler has called it an anti-nostalgia film. So paradoxically, you have a more traditional time during the Depression when people are feeling a certain sense that the old country is something, thank you very much again, that they really cherish and treasure, and they feel its vulnerability. Another reason that 1936, when Yiddle, Meat and Fiedel came out, that there's such a different idea of how the drag is being used and how it plays out in the narrative is, of course, Hitler and also anti-Semitism in places like Poland. For instance, 1936 was Hitler's Olympics. You know, there were all these theories of Jews and, you know, all other people who are not Aryans as being degenerate. So Joseph Green, who directed this film, Yiddle, Meat and Fiedel, I mean, he was looking for a reason to direct. He was looking for a reason to direct and have Molly Picon be the star. By the way, it's a co-production. Shirley is right that these mostly are American Yiddish films, but not all. And this one's a co-production in Poland. And so it's really significant that he goes out of his way in the script to have there be Yiddle, who is, of course, in a trouser role. She's disguised as a boy. But to have it be cross-dressing in the service of family values. Yes. The way this works is she's trying to make a living as a klezmer, but if she was busking as a girl, that could be a shanda, right? That could be like something that would not be good for her reputation. So in her disguise, in her costume, she's actually protecting her virtue. So, you know, it works, and Molly goes through the whole role. Even though she's about 40 years old and quite chesty by this time, her audience just loves this, and nobody is, you know, they definitely bridge the gap. It's fine. So there are all these do's and don'ts. You have Yiddle, which literally means little Jew, who's fey, but the audience already knows it's really a girl. So it's a non-threatening way of showing effeminacy, right? And so she's neurotic, she's fey. On the other hand, you have another kind of diasporic, Jewish, stereotypical character, one of the other musicians who has this scraggly beard, and he tells tall tales all the time, and he's just compulsive liar, actually. But contrasting the two of them, they're both foils for this guy who's the embodiment of the new Jewish man, the modern, the respectable, the clean-shaven, the athletic, the the incorruptible guy named Freum. And Freum, of course, is really Molly's love interest. So a lot of the clips we're going to see revolve around how can she, disguised as the boy, get the he who wouldn't be interested in her as a he, even though he's strangely attracted. So I'll let some of these speak for themselves. Let's see, am I leaving anything out? Oh yes, just one other thing to watch for. There are two different scenes here where you'll see a physical casting off as something that's seen as an undesirable advance or approach. And I'll let them speak for themselves, but I'll just say one happens in the lake and the other one happens backstage between the two theater producers. The final thing to know is, there's that saying, the love that dare not speak its name, right? That's about homosexuality in this time of the closet. Well, this film gets uniquely close to speaking something about homosexuality. There's this line that she's going to drop into once she's back in a dress. And let me just say one other thing about Vito Russo and this celluloid closet idea, because this holds absolutely true for Yiddish film. Yiddish film didn't have necessarily the whole trip about machismo in the same way. I mean, this buff guy is hardly like, what you'd consider buff in Hollywood, but, So on the other hand, Vito said that by the end of any of these films where someone is imputed or there are these signs that somebody is that way, that somebody is, seen as queer, there are two ways it can end. By the final reel, either they're cured, right, or they're killed off, like the children's hour. So this plays out. So Molly, not even halfway through the film, is back in a dress. Like different things happen in the movie, et cetera, et cetera. But she has this great line, and I'm going to say it because it's going to go by so fast. She says, look, come on, you're all up here laughing, but come on, have you ever been in love with a guy? And why would he be interested in you if you're not, if you're another boy? She goes, a yingle mit a yingle, hat epis a tam. So I don't know how much Yiddish you know. I don't even know that much Hebrew, but I'll just try with this. So tam, that word tam, it means a boy with a boy, a yingle mit a yingle. Hot epis has a little something, a tam. Tam in the in the subtitles here, it's reading, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't have a sense. But tam can also mean taste, like Tom Tom crackers, like it's in peculiar flavor land, So that's about the closest I think we come to speaking its name in Yiddish film. So. Okay, here we go. Molly Picon, 1936, Yiddle with the Fiddle. We're going to start this one off. There's Molly singing to herself. Oh, I'm sorry. No, we're going to start with the bands. This is a sort of battle of the bands. We'll get later to Molly singing Spiel du Fiddlespiel. But this is a little scene where two different sets of klezmer duos are rivals, and you'll see how they work it out.
Shine. We're going to play a version of this which also has the lyrics that appear later in the film, but I want you to understand also that it's been the song which has been given the title Erstwhile, which means listen up. It's a street singer song, you know, someone who's busking, looking for people, you know, they're throwing money. That's what's happening in this courtyard. That's how musicians used to do busking. And of course, it's very ethnographic. They're in this wonderful, you know, courtyard in the Polish, you know, actually on location in Poland, because Joseph Green, who had, you know, become an American citizen, was back there to make the movie. But there was an ethnomusicologist named Ruth Rubin, and she was very much dedicated to, after the war, after the Holocaust, finding survivors. She was in Canada, and she would interview them about the music that they remembered from the old country, from before the war. And she recorded someone named Yankel Zipper, who in 1955 in Montreal sang a very, 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 very similar song to her and said that he remembered learning it from someone who actually was singing it on the street. So it could be chicken and egg. It could be either somebody learned it from the movie and they sang it on the street, or maybe they actually took it from, you know, a busker song and put it in the movie. So we're going to have this featuring Melissa Fogarty now.
Kleinen Vieh.
Saskia Lane on the double bass. Thank you. I promise to introduce you to everyone before the evening is done. And I also want you to know that just like the musicians in the film, and we're going to see lots more from this film coming right up, but yes, we also have other ways of income streaming, and that can include recordings, such as the song you just heard on our latest album called Live from Brooklyn, which will be available in the lobby on your way out. Conveniently, thank you. So everything that I told you about the film will now be on parade, I hope, in terms of all the different ways in which this anti-degeneracy message is being conveyed. I'll just specify that, for instance, Fromm has this stage business of doing carpentry. This is the guy that Molly's in love with, who's played by Leon Liebgold, who, by the way, I did have a chance to meet at those MoMA screenings. Many of these actors actually appear in multiple Yiddish films. It was kind of a small world. And fortunately, many of them did survive, although not necessarily a lot of the people who are extras in this film. It's incredibly moving to know also that in things like the wedding scenes where they're being fed at a banquet, that was a lot for those extras, you know, to just have servings of food put in front of them extra. And Molly Picon actually wrote about that in her memoirs. So we're going to see a dream sequence with Molly, a sort of wish fulfillment thing, not very subtle at all. There's going to be a whole way in which Kalamutka, that's the guy I was talking about who's the tall tale teller, actually gets the truth out of Molly. She can't stand it anymore that she's in this disguise and has no one to tell. And there's one line that I couldn't show you everything, but he has this great line in Yiddish where he says, she's telling him, look, I really am. You know, they keep hearing, everybody says to Molly, Zayaman, be a man, come on. You're not a girl. What are you acting like that for? And so at one point she says, well, I really am a girl. And he goes, what? And then she says, oh, but I was in love with Fromm and I had to do this and that. And he says, azoi kocht men die Lokschen. So that's the way the noodles are cooked. All right, so we're just going to watch a whole bunch of Molly with Fromm and everybody else. Here we go. Oh, sorry. Play you fiddle play.
Kim schlucken.
touch of sublimation, the kitty cat. Look, he runs, he jumps, he even knows how to swim, which she, of course, does not. Because she's a helpless one, right? The neurotic Yiddish.
Danke, was das mir gerade wird schleichen.
Was händelst du dich also wie ein schämelig Mädel? Bist doch schon ein erwachsener Buche.
Danke, was das mir gerade wird schleichen.
Dank, weniger und geh besser essen.
Was ist? Was weißt du die? Na, was sind die?
This is after the band is breaking up. She's trying to figure out what to do.
Ich meine, du bei ihm jetzt. Schäme sollst du sie. Igel, sei ein Mann.
Ich sage mal, er hat es mir nicht.
Ja, mir schicken es soll ich so leben. Was dann willst du gewollt sein, am Igel?
Ja. Weil ich bin am Mädel.
Wohl?
Ich bin doch nicht kein Junge, ich bin doch ein Mädel. Ihr seht doch, als ich bin ein Mädel. Was ihr lacht ihr was? Ihr seid schon einmal gewesen ein Mädel. Mama, bin ich verliebt. Oi, Mama, bin ich verliebt. A Klezmer Junge, Mama, getreierlich, man Narren sind. Ja, mir liegt der Tag im Sinn, aber ich ihn in der linker Pjatte. Oh, weil meint doch, ich bin ein Junge. Ihr seid schon einmal gewesen verliebt in ein Junge. Ein Junge mit ein Junge hat etwas getan.
Nur du weißt, was ich will. Oh, spiel du Fiedel, spiel.
And on the accordion piano, Shoko Nagai. I want to make sure to impart a few pearls of wisdom also from Vito Russo's Celluloid Closet. So here's what he said. Technically, homosexuals were just as invisible on screen as they were at that time in real life. They continued to emerge, however, as subtextual phantoms representing the very fear of homosexuality. So what we're going to look at now will be more from the American Matchmaker film that we saw at the top, you know, the first Tango, right? The one where the matchmaker was basically coming out to his client. I want you to also let me know how many of you are familiar with the work of George Chauncey. Anybody? So he has an amazing book that I was very fortunate was published exactly in time for me to read it before I finished the article that I wrote and that went into this Jewish Folklore and Ethnology Review media issue in 1994, because his book is called Gay New York, 1890 to 1940. I highly recommend it. It's amazing. And it especially deals with a lot of the vernacular that people used, and that it was very, very understood among a lot of people in the life, which is one of those expressions that, words like artistic, musical, those had a lot of very clear implications, even bachelor. And this movie, Americaner Shadkhn, is like a total mind blower in terms of all the different in-jokes that are going on. There's even a line in this film, 1940 Edgar Ulmer, the fifth of his 5 Yiddish films, the only one that takes place in his own place and time, but in an absurdist version thereof. All his other films are like, set in the shtetl that he built, in the potato fields in Long Island or whatever, or had, back-to-back filmings of that in the Ukrainian Window Washers Union folk dance movie, because he was making whatever he could to get by as a filmmaker after he got kicked out of Hollywood. So he's got this character played by the quote-unquote Yiddish Fred Astaire, Leo Fuchs, whose real name is Nat Silver, who becomes this thoroughly modern matchmaker in Grand Concourse named Nat Gold. It's a long story. As you may have noticed in the opening, there's this whole thing about this Uncle Shia, who's really based on Edgar Ulmer's own cousin, Gustav Heimel, Uncle Gus, who really was this very, very flamboyantly gay man who was a refugee from Germany who worked at Western Costume in Hollywood. There are lots of things that go on here. I'll let them speak for themselves. There's a very sporty sister we see only for a moment. One of the few instances I think of, like some kind of Yiddish celluloid lesbian closet. Her name is Chavale or Elvi. And she has a very brief mention here, which I love, where she's making fun of all kinds of traditional Jewish women's roles. She gets a phone call that you don't see in these clips, but it's a great film. I recommend it, where she's literally on a white telephone. There was a kind of tradition of what they called the white telephone films. And her friend is saying, but I'm pregnant and I'm afraid I've eaten pickles and radishes. I'm afraid it'll harm the baby. So I knew that by heart from doing this talk so many times. And I saw a 1933 Edgar Ulmer film made in Canada, because you couldn't. It was illegal to make a film about venereal disease here. It was all about syphilis, like a hygiene film from 1933. And I suddenly hear in a proper British accent, but I've eaten pickles and radishes and I'm afraid it will harm the baby. So believe me, they were just entertaining themselves in a lot of this stuff. I mean, who cares? So on the other hand, there's a couple of serious things. There's this thing that the mother sort of reveals to him. He doesn't realize all this trouble. He gets engaged 7 times. It never works out, all these broken engagements. What could be the matter? So where in Yiddelmeet Fiedel, it's really this hang-up about what is effeminate, what's not, what's acceptable. In this one, it's about a certain kind of self-denial. And so the mother's sort of pointing out to him, look, it's not, maybe it's kind of in in your genes or something like that. And so she uses this phrase that they kind of mistranslate. They say, it's something about mishpochetige Feller, and it says family traits, but really it means defects. So you can watch for that. Okay, I think we'll just play these clips, and just so you know, the sister also makes fun of Orthodox guys in the big black hats. She calls them the cowboys. She's got all kinds of great lines, but she basically has a line which I'll just say. You're going to see it in. Watch for the dowry line, okay? Just make sure you don't miss that. Here we go. And it's, by the way, it's made in 1940. This is significant because just like Uncle Moses, by 1940, there wasn't really international distribution of Yiddish films. It was just too hard to get them around to people, even if the war hadn't broken out other places yet. So Yinglish could appear again because it wasn't going to alienate, you know, the theater goers in Buenos Aires or Warsaw who couldn't understand Yinglish, you know. So now you can have a more realistic, even though absurdist, portrayal of New York Jewish life, whether it's Central Park West or the Grand Concourse. Oh, and watch for the bird cage, the Fagala. We've got all the Fagala triple entendres.
Wo sagst du? Wir kennen doch nicht. Wir kennen doch noch, wenn du bist gewesen, ein Presser bei Netten in Shop, und das verbrennt alle seine Dresskisten. Nicht der mich nicht.
I'm on duty, so. Was let er English? Was ist das für ein Lassen? Verwasch let er nicht in jedes Verwasch. I'm a fish eating, so.
Hat der Mäus gepitzt wie dem Käsers Pferd mit Maschine knapp. Hat ihm gemacht für sein Man Friday.
Was ist das?
A Man Friday is an Erev Shabbos, a kurzer Freitag, a Gabe. Am I right, Moshe Pippich?
I got to make the rounds, so.
See, dress British, think English. Okay, there's the bird cage again. No accident, mise en scène.
Eigentlich in eine fiese Lepse so. Heimnissen, aber ganze kein mit Epsom so. Aber der Mann soll stehen aus. Gute Nacht, ne?
I hope everybody understands the word fagala may or may not be related to that offensive word faggot, but the word fagala literally means little birdie, which can also be a term of great affection. And look, he's a bird in his gilded boudoir, even whistling.
Von der Fabi. Oh, ist du Saboy. Fresse, zerrissene Gurgels. Ich habe noch also es nicht gesehen. Oh, du Sagin, Säufers, Fresse. Ja, no. Kachumme. Weißgeist. But the main thing was mir bothered is what du so heus. Leute Bachelors. Ne, ich, na viele du Steigele so ich hab Bachelor. Alleine Steigele. Hello, Kanarke. Hello. Sag mir noch, Kanarke, was bist du? An Zazi. A Sucher zane Kehle. What then how I get
Now listen to this melody, it's a lullaby. Cut to Now, what melody is in the opening credits? The opening credits already foreshadow the Fagala lullaby. And there's Gustav Heimo, the original story, quote-unquote G. Heimo, Uncle Gus, Uncle Shia, which you'll hear more about Uncle Shia momentarily. S. Castle was actually Ulmer's wife, Shirley Castle Ulmer. She was related to kind of Hollywood aristocracy. And so they make it look like a big production company.
Ich will give my schön im Naden.
Naden is all right. No, then Hussen, stell her rein and say.
Troubles mit dir, huh?
Deine troubles haben mich erfasst.
Your troubles worry me a lot more.
Tunmedendigt sich mit ihrer so. Ungunisch.
Sag mir, Mama, wo ist das mit mir? ist also wie ein schlimm Masel geht man noch.
Aponym ist eine Spuche-Sache.
Was meinst du?
Bist Aponym reingeroten in dein Vetter Schein. Aus gejarschen sein Masel.
Auf Masel ist euch du ein Jirische. Und was hat er mir rübergelost in der Zibur?
Ihm hat sich auch nicht geführt mit Kinkalis. Wirst du doch meinen, als ist Chudile gewesen, ein Neuswurf oder ein Kalike? Hebt sich nicht um. Gewinnt gesinnt, stark, in ein Leitischer dazu. Hat jeden geholfen. Aber Kalles haben beim Gatt ein kurzes Liebes. Hat ein Hussen gewonnen, und hat geboren euch. Menschen haben von dem Häuser gemacht, in Scheien, aber hat nicht gewusst, wo es ist. Bis in den Tag ist ihm Flitzling eingefahren.
Wie heißt?
Herr Meister. Wird allein Werner Shadkhn.
Von sich allein?
Nein, in der Shadkhn für jenem. Für andere. Waren andere Menschen, hat gekannt zu Neuführen und zu Neufuhren, ist doch gepasst wie für Nächtig. Hat getracht, dass in dem Schreis, was wird helfen, verknacken andere, wird schon auch geholfen werden.
In dem Schriss wird geholfen werden? Und die Menschen, als ich bin ähnlich zu ihnen mit allen?
Mit allen Pitschewkis, mit Neusehen, mit einer Knie, mit den Reden, sei von draußen, sei von innen weg.
Euch mit dem, das kann nicht gemaselt sich alles? Das kann doch nicht sein. Das ist doch nicht Europe. Das ist doch Amerika.
Ein Spruchefehler schwimmt über tiefe Jammen. In Masel, in Dolle, schwimmen über tiefe Wasser und netzen sich auf den Stein die Piates.
Meinst du, das ist doch nicht möglich. Das kann doch nicht sein. Die meisten sagen, dass ich bin ein Gilgi von Vetter.
Wirst bald umkicken, wirst du bald allein sehen. Ich will dir etwas weisen, wirst allein suchen, als ihr bin gerecht.
Ein Spruchefehler schwimmt über Jammen.
Now, by the end of this film, guess how it resolves? Nat is saving the honor of his matchmaking client. He's fixed her up with the guy he thinks is the ultimate, who runs off with the dowry that Nat himself has provided to Argentina. And so in order to not leave her standing at the altar, he gets married. So he's cured. So we're moving on now from musical comedy, where they're cured, to the musical tragedies. We have two, and the first of these is a really intense allegorical movie made in 1940 as well, starring the screen cantorial idol Moshe Oisher. You may have heard of him. Absolutely amazing and definitely very operatic. This film is based on the true story of a cantor named Yol Duvid Strashunsky, who had been a singer both in the Warsaw Opera and before that an actual cantor in Vilna. There had also been a play called Der Vilna Bal Bessel based on his story earlier in the 20th century. And in the 1840s, when there was a lot of struggle for individual ethnic nationalities to have their own national culture, the first Polish opera, Halka, was written. And it's true that Yol Duvid Strashunsky was recruited to this and sang. And it's true that there was a composer named Maniushko and a conductor named Chilchinsky. So they're brought in as though they are recruiting him from hearing him sing. They're kind of coming to audition him while he's singing at high holidays in his shul. And they come in top hats. It's very much of a performative thing for them, whereas for him, of course, it's very much about, you know, his faith and his religion and his identity and his beliefs. So there's this contrast that's set up, but in the end, this really has lots of seduction tropes. So it's kind of like gays, goys, they all recruit, right? So you've got these tropes of he's got these furtive nightly meetings. After he meets them, he kind of finds it irresistible. They find ways that these rendezvous happen. And his father-in-law gets really suspicious, where is he disappearing to every night? So you kind of, even that seems like, you know, okay, what's really going on? So there's a kind of music versus sexuality kind of metaphor. And in the end, even after he's kind of busted for these forbidden meetings, he can't really stay away, and his wife actually agrees to become his beard, and she even stands outside kind of on guard while he's basically coming back to say, look, I can't do this anymore, but I had to hear what your latest opera was, and you'll see the way it all plays out. Two things to explain. First of all, musically, there's this solfeggio versus chazones, like he's learning the do-re-mi system, that's solfeggio, whereas he's singing a kind of lai-la-lai kind of cantorial style. And you'll hear how he internalizes the Western musical do-re-mi. You'll also hear Halka, a melody that's actually an aria from Halka, is very, very reminiscent of a Yiddish lullaby that he sings. And this is not a traditional lullaby. It's actually written by Moshe Oisher, back engineered so that in the plot he can confuse the two when some tragedy befalls him. So before we go on, I'm going to have, now you've already met Deborah Kreisberg, our clarinet sax player. Let's have a round of applause. And now, let me introduce by name her compatriot in our horn section, Pamela Fleming on the trumpet. So first we'll hear just a little tidbit, but the main core melody of this aria from Halka. Let's play that one. And here is Unter Beimer, the Yiddish lullaby. So you hear the melody's kind of inverted and the phrasing is very similar. So that's, again, deliberate so that what's going to transpire can happen as the tragedy unfolds. So obviously when you hear things like Moonlight Sonata or certain Chopin pieces, it's very romantic. More of the tropes of seduction, the wolfish glances, you'll notice, the cantor kind of succumbing back in his chair. There are all these visual effects that really reinforce this idea. And then later, when the cantor does go to the Warsaw Opera, it's significant that he does shave his beard. He is in costume, prancing around. But when an act of mourning is required, and you may know that a Jewish tradition is for the mourner to have some piece of their clothing torn. That's a sign that you're in grief for someone who's died. But you see revealed that under his opera costume, there's this striped garment that's this Jewish ritual kind of tallis. So all the time, he has not forgotten his people. So it's this really terrible allegory because in 1940, there are these refugees in New York writing this script who basically feel like there's been this failed experiment in bridging to a great European culture. And they feel like the Jews who believed in this in 1840 are symbolized by what happens to this guy. And it's very much to me a similar thing to someone who can't stay away. You know, they're really drawn to something forbidden. So again, there's that idea of, that he tries very much to not let this tear him apart, and yet he's ostracized from both sides. So here we go. Let's watch some of this amazing film. And again, it starts on the high holidays and in the shul with the audition, quote unquote, or the performance.
Ich hab gewollt, ich hab ein bisschen durchgehen.
Nun na, macht zur Erde Schalachler im Hals. Kennst dich noch alleine verkiel.
Nu, Nute. Wo sitzt du da immer? Nu!
Nu, das heißt ich, ja. Wie geht du schon weg jeden Abend, da?
Pünktlich wie allemal, pünktlich wie ein Segen. Ludwig van Beethoven, Kantor Joildowitsch Straschunski. Setz da.
Ah, danke. Vielen Dank.
Feldtag.
Wunderlich, sehr schön. Schön. Modne, Herr Manuschka. Also schnell wie ich trete über eine Schwelle, werde ich zu tun. Alles ist also brennend in Modne. Aber also schnell wie fängt uns zu spielen, wird die ganze Fremdkeit aufgewischt. Und ich da viel zu euch als ein Nun schafft.
Das ist die Musik. Aber den ganzen Zauber von der Musik wird er erst fühlen, als er wird fließend Noten lehnen können. Und morgen habe ich eine neue Überraschung für euch. Morgen wollen wir Happen zusammen spazieren im Gurten von Chopin. Also, wie wird du Jablowski kennen singen? Ich will Lehrer wird ihn nennen.
Es ist schwer, das ist schwer.
Schwer? Nee. Die ganze Partie wird er durchgehen, nur du auch. Und du beim A, du wirst er begründen werden.
Ja. Von Manuschka.
Ja.
Der sagt so gut, ich spiele von mir. Ich gehe weg, meine Frau wartet mir. Ich will ehrlich, sag mal.
Schluss! Erlebt! Erlebt! Weißt du, wer es wird die Arie singen? Weißt du, wer es wird mein Opera Halka singen?
Wir singen in der Warschweroper. Ist das See, hast du schon versorgt. Was wir nehmen eine goldene Kehle in See weg. Was Frabalabus bist du da rauf? Es ist doch Insatz. Die Erst, Insatz. Tomer ist uns verschafft, ein bisschen nachts, gehst du sehr weg. A so viel Fried vermut es darin. Wer wird sein Inser Juilliard Zibur?
Unter Bäumen wachsen großen, und die Weise winden blasen, und die Weise winden blasen, schwer. Was tut ihr du?
Joel David, ihr bringt dir a treurige Psyre. Der dein Hoemes hat ihr bestruft.
Was ist geschehen?
Wehret, dein Kind, wehret. Sucht auf wieder nicht gemal, bus verkrie.
Es ist du a Gott auf der Welt.
Straszunski, a ja ofte. Nu. Ja, Straszynski. Was ist mit euch? Unter Bäume wachsen Grasen, die Beine wind.
Unter Bäume, beneath the trees. Melissa Fogarty. All the lyrics in transliteration, and the original Yiddish alphabet are in booklets from our CDs, so you're very welcome to learn them from me or to have them that way. We have just a little time to go into the last film of this Yiddish Celluloid Closet. Of course, the Dybbuk is known even as the Yiddish Exorcist, but it's kind of a crazy way to view it. There's so much to be said about it, but in terms of the Yiddish Celluloid Closet, there's one very important story. I think we'll just have the band play a very quiet Hasidic-style thing underneath these so that we can digest a little bit more about it. When I was finishing the draft of my essay about the Celluloid Closet of Yiddish film, I had sent a reading copy to Jim Hoberman, who I'd worked with at the Museum of Modern Art, and I knew him various ways, and I was waiting and just really wanted to get his feedback. This is really before email. So I finally called him up. He said, "Oh, I'm glad you called. I've been so busy. But you know, it's very interesting what you were saying about the Dybbuk in particular, because you know, there's something I didn't put in my book, and his big book was one of the reasons they had a Museum of Modern Art retrospective of Yiddish films called Bridge of Light. He'd written this compendium, amazing. He said, you know, when I was interviewing people who knew the director of the Dybbuk, Mikkel Wyszynski, I found this one woman in Italy who'd worked with him on like spaghetti westerns or something in the 60s, and I said his name to her, because he was no longer alive, but he said Wyszynski's name, and she burst out laughing. He said, you know, I didn't put this in my book, it didn't seem germane, but I think for you I should tell you. He said, she burst out laughing, and she said, oh, come on, he was a flaming homo, you know? And not as a suppression, but Hoberman basically said to me, well, you know, I didn't really feel it was my place to put that in the book. But he does have a little caption on his picture of the Wunderkind director that just says he was a flamboyant director. So let's have a little bit of a Bon Yeshua arrangement of a Hasidic niggin so I can tell you just a little bit more about who we're going to see and what they're doing in the Dybbuk and how they all interrelate. Just a little quiet thing, and I'll play the first little bit with you, and then I'll come in and speak about it. So when I was writing my paper, there was so much everyone would say about sexual identity and gender fluidity and the Dybbuk. Here's this woman whose spirit is inside of the man, or the man whose spirit is inside the woman, and all these different interrelations in this Shin Ansky text taken from folklore that he collected before World War I. It goes on and on. The brilliant Professor Naomi Seidman has unbelievable things to say about it. But what could I add to this? Well, I worked at YIVO on the 5th floor on 86th Street, and one of our other people up in the garret area, in what had been the servants' quarters when it was still a mansion, was Lauren Sklamberg. Lauren is now the music archivist at YIVO, but then he was the graphic designer at the old YIVO, and also already in the Klezmatics, which had a very openly gay contingent. And I mentioned the Dybbuk, and he says, oh, that mikvah scene is so hot. And I said, Lauren, I'm trying to do an academic paper. I can't just go on gaydar alone. That was before Jim Hoberman told me about Mikkel Wyszynski, though. So, a tiny who's who before we watch all the clips. This is a multi-generational story of the supernatural and some tragedy. It does end with someone dying. It fits that pattern, but there is real love, possibly not homoerotic, but certainly homophilic, between the yeshiva partners. So the first generation is Nissen and Sender, and we're going to see Nissen singing Shir HaShirim, singing his very special melody of the Song of Songs. And his study partner, who's so very close to him that, you know, they were married in the same week, and the thing that they keep trying to tell their Rebbe, that they have this beautiful plan to stay even more closely linked in their lives as they go forward, now living in separate places. Both their wives are expecting. They keep trying to tell the Rebbe, and the Rebbe is, no, enough with you. Enough about how close you are. I don't need to hear anymore. But they want their children, if one's a boy and one's a girl, to be married. Well, it turns out, you know, in Jewish law, you're not supposed to promise the unborn. There was a little, you know, technicality that would have made this all wrong. But at any rate, what really is the tragedy as it's played out in the film, though, more so than it is spelled out in the theater production that preceded it, was that, in fact, the bond between Nissen, who drowns after the last time he sees his friend as a young man, and Sender, that their pact has been violated because, in fact, one has a boy and one has a girl. Even though he doesn't live to see the boy, the girl is alive and well, and the two of them do meet and do fall in love. But it's money that gets in the way, because in the meantime, Nissen, and by the way, speaking of suppressing and acting out, the last thing that we see Nissen before he goes off on the road and subsequently drowns in a ferry accident, he says, now don't forget, you better get a big dowry because my wife's going to have a boy. And it's kind of like this ha moment. Well, here it is. Sender loses his friend and he becomes an incredibly mercenary merchant. All he wants is to have the biggest and the best deal for his daughter. She's going to have the absolute, best, richest suitor possible. And so when a poor boy comes along named Honen, who really is her bashert, who really is her intended, who really is Nissen's son, he can't even see that boy because that boy is just a poor yeshiva student, so not good enough for his daughter. So it's going to be the bond of the Shir HaShirim that finally makes him realize what a mistake he's made. But that hot mikveh scene, you'll get to see a little bit of that. Now, bear in mind that there's a very voyeuristic part to it. There's another pair of study partners, Honen, and his very fearful study partner, who's watching him, but he's very much afraid of the sort of Kabbalistic and dangerous ways that Honen is trying to make all the money so that he can be the suitor for the woman that he's so in love with. The last thing I'll say about it is that the forbidden nature of, when Honen dies, he really does come back and he inhabits this woman. Now, the woman who's playing, his beloved Leah, in real life, she also was still alive when the MoMA show was going on, and the same guy who's playing, the same guy who's playing Honen was also the one who you saw in various earlier films as well, Leon Liebgold. He was the romantic interest Freud in Yidel Meet and Fiedel and so on. So these are wonderful ways that the cast of characters kind of goes through the revolving door of Yiddish film. So here we are, again, the 1937 film. This one is the only one that we're seeing tonight that's not only filmed in Poland, but made by an entirely Polish Jewish cast and crew. And it had been running as a successful theater production since 1921, so it was a huge honor. The music in this is credited to Henoch Cohn, who, by the way, one more Yiddish Celluloid Closet thing, which I think we can substantiate, but later on, Henoch Cohn had been involved with Judith Berg, who dances the dance of death in a famous scene. We're not seeing that now, but you can find it on YouTube. And later on, Judith Berg was with Felix Fibisch, who was a choreographer here in New York, very well known for folkloric dance. And I heard recently that it was quite well known in certain circles when they came here that it was a quote-unquote lavender marriage between Fibisch and Judith Berg. So I don't think there's any shame in saying that at all. Okay, here we are. watch the body language between the two men to the left of the Rebbe. These are Nissen and Sender. Keep watching the body language. These two men to the left of the Rebbe.
Rebbe.
Sender. Nissen. Was ist? Will mir etwas sagen?
Ja, Rebbe. Wir will nach suchen, Rebbe. Wir will nach etwas suchen. Wir beide sind Chaveren.
Ich weiß.
Nein, Yeshiva gelernt.
Ich weiß.
In eine Woche Chassene gehabt.
Ich weiß.
Und jetzt sind wir erweitert, aufgerissen einer von anderen. Nissen wohnten dem Merchakim. Und hier treffen sich nur bei Rebbe und die Teufel. Darüber haben wir beschlossen.
Beschlossen? Ein Mensch beschließt nicht, Kinder.
Filmed on location, the very same lane in Poland where Molly Pecan is busking in the year before, in 1936, Yiddish Celluloid. So this is Wyszynski in Jim Hoberman's book. There he is, the Wunderkind. And here's the mikveh. Now, a bare torso is really hot, really racy. Look, he's got a silhouetted nipple, glistening skin. Really hot for a Yiddish film.
Dort im Mikve. A Yeshiva-Bucher, Hunen. Hilft der Rüsens, Samach Mem.
So we're going back earlier in the film, so you hear this version of Shir Hashir. And the reaction shot. This is Sender. And now Sender has Leah, his daughter, singing.
Wer hat dich das alles gelernt?
Hunen.
Hunen? Hunke? Wann kennen das?
Sein Taten sie rasieren.
Sein Tatens? Das kann nicht sein. Unter dem Schirm hat gesungen, ach, aber meiner Nissen. Aber ist schon lange der Trinker geworden.
Oh, sein Tat hat durchgerissen müssen. Sein Tate ist durch der Trinken geworden.
Ui, Maseltov, dir Sende, Maseltov.
Es geht hier durch Tier und durch Teuer. Machatunen fuhren, a viele Beut.
Welche Machatunen?
Sie kommen. Die Machatunen kommen. In der Erstle. Sie gehen ein auf 10 Uhr Käst. Der erste Tochter meine 10 Uhr Käst. 10 Uhr.
Und sich nicht verschämt.
Miss Chava meine. Sie spät. Sie spät.
And ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between, for us too, zu spät, sie spät, it's too late. Thank you for being at this production. And one more? Yeah? I think we'll close out with one famous Molly Pecan tune, a little Abigazint for you all. And we wish that for you all, so long as you're healthy, Abigazint. Thank you so much. Ashenim Dank. And once again, to Shirley Bahar, American Jewish Historical Society, YIVO, and the association, no. Thank you. American Jewish Society. A hartstigen Dank. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I want to say one more thing. When I worked at 86th Street, and YIVO had to move out to get to this place, you know, we had to pack everything up. That's how I saw that promotional photo of Molly Pecan in the tuxedo. And we went for 2 years to 57th Street. And I never got to the promised land over here, but I saw this theater in the blueprints back on 86th Street, so it's a real machaya to be here today. Thank you, everybody. And thanks to the American Society for Jewish Music.